Step right up, ladies and gentlemen, and genders of all ranges, and welcome to the ARTPIT, conducted by the Jeremys, a pair of purveyors of fine art and oddities via the best damned art gallery this side of Long Beach, the Dark Art Emporium. Listen and wonder as we jibber-jabber about all things art, music, movies, and whatever other jive we decide to mosh together. Faint of heart, beware, and welcome to the ARTPIT.
Yeah, well, welcome back to the ARTPIT, ladies and gentlemen, here at the Dark Art Emporium in lovely Long Beach, California. Today, we are focused on our newest exhibition. I don't know why that sounds weird in my mouth right now. It just does.
That's what she said.
Right? So many times. Show, exhibition, showing of work by David Van Gough, the amazing DVG. How you doing, David?
I felt better.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about how shitty we all feel.
Yeah.
Well, except for Lauren, which, by the way, welcome to the ARTPIT.
Hello.
Welcome to the Dark Art Emporium, newest member of the family here. Lauren is, you'll see her when you come in person. She's going to be ringing things up and helping people out and generally just being a part of what we do now. So
I'm excited to do it with you guys.
And, of course, for all of the 5 words that he will contribute over the next hour or so, we do have Jeremy Shaw.
I am here. I'm physically here.
Bad Penny.
Yeah. And I'm Jeremy Cross. So now that we have everybody properly introduced, let's talk about last night.
Let's do it.
Last night was it was technically our second in-person reception since things, right? Was it our second
Yeah,
one?
I mean, kind of.
It was certainly the one that felt the most like an art reception.
Yeah.
The first one, there wasn't. It was not as attended. People were still being a little more cautious about that, and to be fair, that makes sense. But we had a good crowd last night. It was still careful and masked and appropriate, but we had a good crowd of people that came out to support, which made me really happy. I actually got teary-eyed several times during the evening because it felt like old times again.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that that happened for your show because people have been really excited about this for years. Literally 2 years we've been waiting for this moment, and fuck the pandemic, it was happening.
Right. Yeah. It was really nice. It was a kind of welcome return to some kind of normality.
Yeah.
I was really moved myself and honored by the amount of folks that came out. Some of them as far as from San Diego, drove up and then drove back again in the early hours.
Right.
But yeah, it was splendid. It was quite wonderful. It's always vindicating when people show up. But I felt like everybody connected as well. I had a very personal connection with each individual piece. It was a success.
It was wonderful. I mean, it was also just a great excuse to see people we've literally not seen in a year and a half.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like people that we're used to seeing on a very regular basis.
Absolutely,
that have been absent from our lives physically for quite a while.
Yeah.
Again, that was very emotional for me, and I'm sure it was for you as well. Just,
Definitely. Yeah.
Sharing some of that space with those people again.
Yeah, it's kind of like it became more of a celebration, I think, don't you? I feel like it was kind of everybody collaborating together and getting together to kind of like lay waste to the end of this bullshit for how long we're going to get it. I mean,
right.
It might be, I don't know, 4th lockdown soon. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, who knows? As long as people are doing what they need to do, but it's going to keep happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't want to get too much into that. But let's talk more about art.
Let's do it.
We are the
That's
Dark Art Emporium.
that's where we're here.
The ARTPIT.
Kind of the only reason in a way.
Right. I mean, nobody really wants to hear us talk about anything else. I hope not. Although we were going to discuss your favorite sandwich. I know that was on the menu.
Yeah, we were.
Pun intended. You a hoagie man? PB&J? What do you like?
You know, I'm very simple, very vanilla in my tastes in sandwiches. So it generally just boils down to chicken and mushrooms. And
chicken and mushrooms. That's fucking weird, man.
A little bit of cheese on it. Yeah.
That's not vanilla. That's
No.
bizarre. I'm so glad I asked because that's a weird fucking answer.
Really?
I have chicken and mushrooms. Yeah.
Yeah. Who has mushrooms just laying around to put on a sandwich?
Well.
like vanilla. When you said vanilla, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
it's
oh,
gonna be turkey
you
and
know,
sweet.
ice cream.
Like,
Or a
for sure.
vanilla flavored
Or
sandwich.
literally just a vanilla sandwich. Yeah.
No,
Fucking
I mean,
Is that like a
couple of
British thing?
portobellas, and you're off. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds good.
It is. It's exquisite. It's really good.
I
yeah.
love portobellos and
Yeah.
chicken.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it felt much more like a celebration to you since it was the conclusion of 3 series that you've done.
I kept kind of sort of approaching it from the notion that because I was still so close to the work, it hasn't quite hit me yet. I'm sure I'll go through that inevitable kind of grieving process.
How close to the opening was the last brushstroke?
It was a month exactly,
Oh, yeah.
but then it was all that kind of preparation of like varnishing, framing,
Sure.
marketing, publicity, delivery, all that kind of thing. So it still felt very present. I dare say like once Monday rolls around, I won't know what the hell to do with myself. But yeah, you're right. It definitely feels like because it is the end of an era. It's been a decade of my life.
Yeah.
So where I go from here, I've kind of got a nominal idea. Usually what happens with every series I do, there's one specific piece that speaks to me, that gives me some kind of like pathway to what I'm going to be doing next. And in this series, it could be several of them.
Yeah.
But one very specific piece I would say is the dead tree. It really kind of instills some kind of something that I want to explore a little bit more of. So I think, I know vaguely what I'm going to be doing next, but it's certainly not going to be on the scale that these last 3 series have been. I think we're going to get a life back, quite honestly.
Yeah.
It's going to be quite nice to have a little bit more free time, especially because the last 5 pieces were all done in the last 4 months.
Which is just fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an intense turnaround.
Yeah, and it was funny as well because I actually thought I was only going to keep it to 9. Because the original notion was to do the 9 circles of Dante.
Right.
And then I kind of wanted to squeeze one more out for myself, one final circle for me in hell. So I thought, I can really push it, and I did. I managed to knock that one out in like less than a month. It was like 3 weeks. So
wow.
I mean, it was long days though. It wasn't like days where I'm just kind of like a normal. I'm putting in sort of a normal 7-hour day. It was from morning to like. Kind of like what we did last night.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get that out of the way.
Yes, let's.
So that celebration vibe that we were talking about,
definitely
I think
continued.
it took root
Yeah.
in us in a very intense way.
And it wasn't just us. It was a whole host, a plethora
Yeah.
of people that kind of followed, and I kept saying goodbye to people over and over, and I'm like, are you still here?
Like, am I still here?
Am I
That's
still
what I
here?
kept
Yeah.
saying.
No, I'd stepped out the picture by about midnight, I think. Yeah. No, it was. We're all feeling a little sore today.
Sure.
A little tender.
A little fuzzy, a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, but we partied hardy, and
did.
it was worth it.
We drank like we were trying to die.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Now we're feeling every second of that slow death right now.
Except for you, Lauren. You're the
I
only
know.
one who just got to sit back and laugh at us.
I
fools the
it was
entire time.
entertaining for sure.
I'm sure.
Just kidding.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that celebration vibe, man. It was for sure there.
Yeah, it's really good seeing everybody because, like, I had people that come to the gallery for every show last night, and being locked down and not really having this, we lost our community.
Yeah.
And it returned last night. Like, I got to see
Yeah.
those people, like, and you forget about some of them, and then, oh shit, I saw you once a month, like,
right,
for years,
Yeah.
you know, and it's great to see people again.
Yeah. It's one of the most kind of like exciting and almost vindicating things about what we do, because we spend inordinate amount of times isolated anyway as an artist.
Yeah.
We don't get to see people, and certainly because of the pandemic and because of the scope and size of the series and the concentration, I didn't get to see people like a lot of everybody else for, you know, over a year. But it definitely felt like it brought people together. It felt like it was a revitalization of something that we'd lost that was so integral to the thing that propels us anyway, which, you know, because art gives you that community, or specifically the art that we do. Yeah. It's quite easy to feel unmoored and quite isolated. But last night certainly felt like, again, you know, we were all kind of like brought together, and yeah. I'm like I say, it's one of those things where I don't think that I've even begun to really process the whole situation, you know, because my expectation of it was merely just getting the things done so you guys could put them on the wall. Beyond that, everything else was going to be a bonus.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the journey
Yeah.
to get there. So we talked briefly, you know, 10 years,
Right.
3 different series.
That's right.
Why don't you kind of walk us through, you know, how the concept began, what the 3 stages were, and we can kind of dig into the denouement after once we get to that stage.
Yeah. Initially, I think the first series was called Purgatorium.
Right.
And I at that time, I was still working as a graphic designer, but I'd always had it in mind that what I wanted to do was take Shakespeare's The Tempest, and what I liked about that was this idea of Prospero, exiled on this island from Milan as a magician with all of his grimoires and his books, with his muse, because it felt very much part of my situation. It felt like I felt exiled. This was before there was a dark art community. You know, there was no kind of dark art society.
Right.
So
when you say exiled, how did you personally feel exiled?
Because, you know, the things that I was doing at that time, there were only very few of us.
Yeah.
You know, you'll remember this, that, you know, there was like, we were outliers in what we were doing, because really there was only Hyena at that time that really wanted to explore what I would say was the darkest. For us, it isn't the darkest side.
Right.
But, you know, if you're going to give it like a tokenistic title, then that was the darker side of the work. So it was hard to kind of find a placeholder to show the work that we were doing. And more so because I lived in San Diego, and I would only come up kind of sporadically for shows to the LA art scene.
So knowing that you had a finite community to begin with, it makes perfect sense that you would start a 10-year journey.
Absolutely.
Of massive paintings.
Yeah.
You know, I guess to expand that community. I don't know.
I don't know if that was part of, you know.
Did you think about that at all?
I really
or was it
didn't.
Just like getting
No.
into the
No, I with things like this, with a lot of the things that I do, I don't really invite the audience or an anticipated audience into the studio with me. It's very navel-gazing, singular, focused work.
I feel like that's probably smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But
Once you start pandering, you know, what are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, because the moment you do that, like you say, you dilute the process.
Yeah.
But I certainly knew that what I wanted to do was something that, you know, it was one of those things where you could almost feel it in the air, in the ether. There was like this need to make tangible this other language, this alternative way of saying something. All I wanted to do was create this interior world and make large statements of it. And certainly it was inspired by going to like see Christopher Ulrich at La Luz, seeing his Christ Chronicator. So because we felt very much allied in the kind of work that we were doing at that time. But also because I knew that what I wanted to do was make it more literal, in the sense that what I could do was use that as a prism to focus this interior world for myself by using different reference points, which is what I do. You know, it's historical, chronological, personal, political. It involves all these sociological, psychological, all these different facets to kind of like make this nice little stew, this soup, and have something at the end of it, you know, that's tangible, that's digestible. So I started out with those 12 pieces to begin with for Purgatorium, and I showed them in, I think it was Bash Contemporary, when they had a place up in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And the only people that came was like 6 friends. They were here last night as well. It was lovely.
Oh, that's great.
So, but it was you know, it was a long way to. It was like a 9-hour drive to do the show in the Tenderloin. I think I remember telling you the first time I got there was a chap crawling on his hands and knees across the pedestrian crossing. You know, you couldn't even. You had to press a buzzer to get in to the gallery. There was no foot traffic. Yeah. So it wasn't that successful. I walked away, and it's probably folly that I decided, okay, I'm going to do another series exactly. I'm going to follow suit and make, Paradisos Fall. But that took a little longer. I want to say there was a 4-year period between those two shows, because in that interim period, I had a studio down in San Diego at La Bodega, so that was primarily my focus. But also, I didn't really know what that next series was going to look like.
Well, that was what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
It's like how much was it pre-framed out? And you're saying not much.
Not much, no. In fact, with Purgatorium, there was one piece, it's like this very Sisyphean kind of painting of the Sisyphean character with this huge clock on his back. It's a cosmic clock, right. And he's running on a kind of treadmill. And for me, it kind of embodied my life and existence at that time, this continual treadmill where you just can't get off it, and all you're doing is carrying the weight of the day entirely. And then I use that series contextually to approach the shadow of my forebear, the godfather of modern art, Van Gough. Because, that's always, ever since I was a child, or Van Gogh rather, that's always been, the moment you say anybody's, what's your name? And they're like, oh, like Van Gogh, the artist. Yeah. So immediately your predecessor eclipses everything you do. You have this idea that, I'm never going to be able to accommodate anything greater than this forebear, because the yardstick is so great and so extraordinary and so revered that I'm not even going to fucking try. So, but I attempted to, as a kind of form of catharsis, to approach. So he appeared a number of times as a character in that first series. But that, I think what happens is as you're going, you're creating motifs that you can draw on throughout the process. And because what happens is these motifs become common props to say a certain thing. So the work reveals itself through that. You have like a little stock cupboard of,
your lexicon.
A little lexicon of things that you can draw on every now and again to say the things that you want to say. So that made it a lot easier. But I think Paradisos Fall was the hardest to get going again, because my approach, I'd had this idea initially and you can see it in the sketchbook, I'd had this idea initially to do something very with a social conscience, because I'd been in the Barrio Logan, and if you go under the bridge there, they've got these beautiful murals by the Chicano community, but they're all very kind of based contextually around their own culture historically. And I'd had this idea that what I was going to do was I was going to frame the series in that, from that, Benton had this idea of Christopher Columbus arriving in America and I painted him as a mosquito, and it didn't work. It was absurd.
I've seen it in the sketchbook, and it is absurd, but it's also a wonderful image. It was graphically pleasing.
Some things work great as sketches, and it's the moment that you take them and make them a painting that you realize the absurdity of it. I couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
So what I did is I just drew it back into myself, and the first piece that I did was the self-portrait for that series, and everything fell into place after that. And then I remember as well, because I live in Julian, which is a small mining town about an hour and a quarter, 4,000 feet above sea level in the mountains in San Diego. And I remember walking down the street, and I was so talking about not being able to see the wood for the trees, I was so mired in trying to understand what this world would look like. I just couldn't see it, I couldn't visualize it. And then we were walking the dog, and there was this beautiful pathway, and you could see the desert below with the beautiful kind of rolling valleys and mountains. And I was like, oh fuck, this is it. This is paradise. I'm in it. This is so that became the geography for that second series.
And in all three series, you intentionally had all of the scenes take place outside, right?
That's right, yeah. Because I felt because that lent itself to the epicness, and I really like cloud formation, so it's one of those things that I really liked. Less so in this series. I tried to make it this continual sense of a dark shroud, kind of oppressively falling down, or coming down on people. But with all of those three series, I have had a tendency to put them exterior. It's this idea of informing the interior world with the exterior world. It's the microcosm as the macrocosm. So the geography always kind of lends itself psychometrically, if you will. That's kind of the way that I've approached it.
And to me, it's interesting too, because the scale of them, so they're such large pieces, and because they're always a view of some sort of a landscape in the background, they appear as windows, and a series of windows where you're watching this shit unfold in the world, and so it makes perfect sense just from that standpoint as a viewer.
Yeah. I think the other thing as well is that because because I'm from the UK, everything is scale-wise is so small. Whereas in galleries, you can see these huge, sprawling masterpieces. From everybody from the Flemish artists to the Pre-Raphaelites. So I've always been kind of enamored with that idea, and it wasn't until I got here that I was able to realize that kind of vision, because I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to do a large-scale series, and also I think as well, the moment that you approach a work from that intention, it comes back at you, and it tells you that what you need to do needs to say something. It needs to be epic. It needs to accommodate the space that you're giving it, that you're affording it. So I think that was why I approached it initially, to do that large scale. And plus you can get down in the weeds with the details and, those little things, those little meticulous symbols that you can put in there that maybe somebody will miss, but you can kind of, those things can propel the sails of my boat forever. It might never sell, but I'm looking at it and going, fuck, I'm so happy I was able to do this little minuscule thing that means so much, And the term is, maybe not appreciated or not, or I don't know, but it's, Easter eggs is Easter
what
eggs.
comes
That
to
is
mind.
exactly,
It's your paintings are full of fucking Easter eggs.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with Easter eggs in movies and everything else. And so with yours, it's that little thing. It's man, what does that mean? And that's one of the great things about knowing you as an artist and getting to show your work, is that you tell us what they mean to you.
Yeah,
you
and
give us that information.
Yeah, I think as well, one of the things I like about this process is there's it's a multifacet of interpretation there for people. The first interpretation is when they initially see it, and a lot of the time, out of that 100%, people may only get 25% of true understanding of it. So it's not, and I cherry pick as well some of the interpretations. I don't want to give everything away. I think I leave enough ambiguity there for people to make a decision themselves. With my work, I'm always asking questions and never providing a conclusion or an answer.
Well, for instance, when you will describe why you put something in there, but you don't necessarily tell us how it correlates to the other things in the piece.
No.
Which that's the puzzle that I
That's
find fun.
the puzzle, yeah.
Yeah, like, you know.
Yeah.
So we got, you know, a locust, and then, you know, what does the locust have to do with, you know, the floral barbed, what is it called, rebar coming out of the ground, and you know, like how do these pieces play against each other? How do they work in the same environment? You know, we get to fill in that gap.
Yeah, I like for that piece particularly. What I liked is this idea of an impoverishment, internally and you know externally, and I like the idea of like a kind of modern day society with brutalist architecture with the Messiah kind of. It's the two things don't correlate. It's a juxtaposition. Yeah. It doesn't work in that respect. You know, if you think in terms of those mythologies, you know, where they're like he's wandering the desert. Well, there's a kind of desert happening in the inner city as well. So those two things kind of manifested that, and then, you know, the idea of him spitting this huge, grotesque locust it's the manifestation of this interior impoverishment.
By the way, we're talking about Fear in a Handful of Dust, which is the second piece in the Infernal Denouement series. Now, we were talking kind of about the landscapes and the backgrounds, and I think that with this series, an interesting switch is you went from that paradise view from the last one to now we're in Liverpool,
right?
Or we're in some fucked up, horrible version of a fucked up, horrible version of Liverpool. You don't have a lot of fond memories of Liverpool, at least with the architecture, you can tell.
Well, I think for a lot of people, it's going to be different. You know, my childhood wasn't sepia tinted.
Sure.
I think for a lot of people, their experience will be entirely different than my own. What it is a kind of idea, a version of Liverpool that I have kind of locked away in my subconscious from the 1970s, more specifically, when it was more derelict, when, you know, unemployment rates were higher, when violence was a lot more redolent, when you know, there was a lot of oppressive undertone, and I remember specifically during the 80s, Margaret Thatcher, you know, sending a memo saying, let's manage Liverpool to a managed decline, like, you know, because it was that stage where it was so impoverished that it was almost a blight on the rest of the UK, and had a really bad reputation for a while. That reputation's changed now.
Sure.
I always remember somebody saying there's a reason the Beatles fucked off from Liverpool and never came back. You know, I have been back, and, you know, I don't want to speak too badly about the place that I was born, because of course other people are going to have an entirely different viewpoint. It is better, it has improved. Although it has just lost its cultural status, one of the cultural status of Europe. For a time there, they'd invested enough money and begin to rebuild the city centre and make something of it. But for a period during the late 60s, early 70s, it was all tenement blocks and burned out cars, and, you know, at a certain point in the evening, you didn't go out alone, and it was, you know, broken street lights.
So how did that become? Why did you choose Liverpool for this series? What were you trying to use that to say in the final?
Again, it was the geography of this idea of something that's missing. Like, if you think about your own personal hells, you know, the place that you loathe the most is the place that you're going to inhabit. I could not wait to get out. I could not wait to leave.
I can relate to that. I felt the same way about my hometown.
Absolutely.
I grew up in a shithole in Bakersfield, California, and like, you want to leave as soon as you realize where you're at.
Absolutely, that's it. And so really that was the reason. You know, and again, it was like this sort of surface of some kind of soul, this notion of, because I was entirely lost during that time. And the other thing is, it never fostered my ambitions. I felt small and diminutive, and I felt voiceless. So I think that had a real. I think that the crux of that notion, that feeling, that semblance of being lost and isolated, really instilled itself in why I was going to place my own hell in that state.
Right.
You know, and it's funny because when I went home this year, because my dad passed on Christmas Eve, and we kind of got stranded because we were only due to be there for a month to help take down his estate, help with his estate, and invariably we got COVID at the end of it, and so we had to stay another month. And I really got that sense of like personal crisis again, about this feeling like I do not want to fucking die in this place. It is, it isn't entirely the same place, but it still has enough of a psychic effect on me that I haven't really come to terms with. The angst and the anguish that I felt growing up. So it's very claustrophobic as well. It's very small. Now that I live in like somewhere with so much space, I think, wow, we shared a house with like these tiny little bedrooms that you could, sit in the bed and touch the ceiling, those kind of things. So there's a charm in that, but also, again, it feels like you are incarcerated. It feels like there's no way out, and there certainly isn't there.
Looking at the architecture, you say incarceration. Like a lot of the buildings, even down to the representation of the hospital. Yeah. Like they look like they're prisons.
Yeah, it's like a
brutalist architecture.
Yeah, it's a mausoleum. Obviously, for me, that particular, the Royal Liverpool Hospital, it has a lot of resonance because every single family member or friend has passed through its doors and not returned.
Jesus
so
Christ.
So it has that. It has this. It's the oddest thing in the world because it's an extraordinary chimney that has been designed.
The sword of Damocles.
Yes, it's been.
That's real. That's really.
That's really
that's
there. Right? It's ready to fall down on your head.
Yeah.
And it's quite odd as well because it geographically as well. The funny thing is, there was at the time during the 70s this waste ground, and opposite was the Bridewell Studios, which was this old police station that I thought I was going to become part of that collective, and they summarily rejected me horribly, and I didn't paint for 2 years.
Oh, yikes.
When I presented this little portfolio of weird scrolls. And then on the other side of the Bridewell is my old school, my secondary school, Liverpool Collegiate. So that entire geography there is like almost this sense of from the cradle to the grave with this no man's land in between. So I that's why I kind of placed the dead tree being, the dead family tree in a sense, a pine tree, the Christmas tree, or pining tree. It felt very much part of like my process of grief that I was trying to accommodate there. So yeah, I think all of the geography has some kind of personal resonance, but I think as well it has, like I say, this very psychological imprint on my psyche that, just seeing it can affect me. It's almost like a post-traumatic stress, but in that as well is this kind of odd sense of home as well. This kind of like, it's not Ovaltine bedtime stories, but at the same time there was a certain level of comfort that I got from seeing my gran, and these places that they inhabited were quite awful, piss-smelling hallways and broken elevators.
Still, it's familiar.
It's very familiar, yeah.
And like you said, there's going to be comfort in
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So there's this nice incongruity about it as well. This nice, like, seeming juxtaposition between like this sense of home, but not really. You know. So that to answer your first, I think that's why I wanted to place. I always wanted to do it. I always knew there was going to be a series
With Liverpool
in it, and it just happened to be that it was the Infernal. And what's been so odd about that is that, like, my intention from the off, as manifested, it's been very prescient. With each piece, it's kind of informed something that's happened waywardly following its inception. You know, certainly like my dad passing.
Right.
I'd already begun the sketches, and then when he passed, it was almost like this reflection coming back at me.
And you were a year and a half into this series when he passed, right?
Right. Yeah. So I'd done 5, and I mean, it had been a slow process for me because of the pandemic, etc. And you know, I knew kind of slightly where I was going to go. I kind of let each piece inform the next one. I could feel the gravitational pull towards what followed. But once my
was that a full tilt shift though for the
yeah,
rest of the
absolutely
series?
180. Yeah. I mean, it was the bizarrest thing in the world, because you know, you have the Wasteland piece where you have like the kind of in T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. There's a thing called the Bradford billionaire in a silk hat. It's one of the passages in it. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know, that kind of really encompasses this notion of somebody who doesn't belong in a higher position, but is using, you know, people as serfs to get, you know, to ride the back of where he's trying to go. But you have him trying to like unspool and unravel this toxic Jack in the Box. And then the next piece is
hold on, before we get away from that one, really quick, I have to bring up the pinky.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about the Wasteland piece,
yeah.
And I want to continue talking about how your father influenced the rest of the series, but the pinky thing is one of my favorite little details in the entire series. And I had no idea that the pinky was tied to a fucking king and syphilis.
Right, so it was...
It's such a bizarre,
yeah, it was Louis,
thing.
I think it was French Louis IV, and what had happened was, supposedly one of the sort of symptoms... I'd used syphilis in the previous series, actually, for the origins of Black Hole, and I'd used the same kind of mannerism.
That when you drink with the
yeah, when you
out,
so what would happen is that also this term stiff little fingers. That's one of the terms that was used. It's
like for the band.
Yeah. So when one of the things that he would do is he would drink his afternoon tea delicately with his finger, his little finger pointed out, and
because
the courtiers thinking
syphilis,
this was like some kind of, you know, mannerism,
some genteel.
What did you know, they started to emulate it, and it became part of a societal thing that people still do to this day, and even I do. It's the polite way, the etiquette to imbibe tea. So I thought it was a really nice idea of this, you know, unraveling despot.
Thank you for letting me sidetrack you with that.
Oh no, absolutely. No, yeah. It's good to be reminded myself of these things because I can't always remember.
But again, just those details, that's absolutely one of my favorite in the show. I also want to talk about some of the other things that informed the series, but I don't want to lose track of where we were talking about with your dad.
Yeah.
So specifically, going from the piece that before he passed to the piece after he passed.
The Violent Hour.
What influence did that moment in your life have in that work?
Well, you know, it's there's part of me that, you know, is always delighted by the idea of playing with, you know, religious imagery. And it was initially the idea of like bloody robes.
Wait, there's religious imagery in your work?
Yeah, I know, right? I know, did you miss it? Yeah. It runs over you with a truck, right?
Subtle.
Yeah. So I'd like this notion. I'd been reading about Rasputin for some reason, and he's a figure that another outlier figure that fascinates me, the Mad Monk. And I'd read that it took him like, being stabbed and poisoned and shot and drowned before he actually died. But I had this idea of, him kind of standing there in these bloodied robes. But that kind of came back with the whole pandemic thing, where I kind of thought, in a sense, if you want to talk about this notion of without getting too theocratic about it, but this notion of a father figure who is all-seeing and all-knowing, there's almost this sense of blame in a way, where like there's this idea of blood on somebody's hands,
Sure. There's certainly not an innocent character there.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there was this alchemy thing as well, where I was like, the Red King, this idea of like the fourth stage of alchemy to make the Philosopher's Stone is called the Red King. So I had this, I thought it's a really good way of symbolizing this idea of the father laying waste, standing over his creation and laying waste, which is kind of how I felt when my dad passed. It was the laying waste. Yeah, it was a personal apocalypse.
By the way, we're talking about the Violent Hour painting.
Yeah,
right
the
now,
Violent Hour. Yeah.
Just if you're trying to find the piece to look at it.
Yeah. And I had him standing over my native Liverpool. Kind of the buildings, because always like sometimes I like playing on the word on puns as well, where the streets run red, or painting the town red. These nice visual images. How do I play with that? How do I inform a piece to say something? Because of course the colours of the Liverpool football team as well is red. So there were all these kind of like connotations that I could play with to I guess manifest this very singular vision, because there's quite a lot of analogy and symbolism in it, but it's quite a simple, arresting image. It really doesn't need
it doesn't have all the little hidden bells and whistles or the Easter
right.
eggs.
It really it's hard hitting. Yeah. You get it immediately, and I think that's what I felt. I think I felt this notion of somebody who I can't speak to, who has always been in a sense absent, even though he was in my life. Right. I could have a conversation and a dialogue, but it was never on a fundamental level. So there was like this sense of an absence, and I liked the idea of this God figure standing over his creation, and he either looks like he's in benediction or completely batshit crazy. You can't make that distinction. It's hard to make that distinction because of the way his eyes are heavenward. Are they rolling into the back of his head, like
it's certainly one of the most powerful pieces in the show. And to your point, it's basically three elements. You got the red city, you got the character, and then you got the nuclear explosion in the background. Yeah. But it's super powerful.
It was the change. It was it was the Red Wedding. To use analogy from Game of Thrones. It was that moment in where everything changes, where there's a bloodbath, a before and after. So it became obvious to me that the rest of the series would be again informed by the events that had happened previously. There was no other way for me to go after that, and I like that about though. I like that it's a game of two halves. I like that it's that flip side of the album, where the first half is entirely a bunch of kind of like rock, kind of metal rockers, if you will. Sure. And then the second side is a lot more staid and melancholic. And I feel that as well. It's so weird as well because
the color palette even
shifts. The color palette shifts.
Everything.
But the other thing about it as well is that conversely, I was a lot more loose with my brushwork and experimental in the first half of the series, and that took longer. Whereas the second half only took 4 months, just out of necessity. But I was a lot more meticulous and stated, and wanted every stroke to matter. It wasn't like it's not that anything was throwaway, but I really wanted to free myself from that thing that I've done previously with the other series where
it's crazy because
the calculating, it's so difficult, to maintain that level of concentration and focus where, you're continually like trying to paint every single, it's unnecessary in a lot of ways because your eye doesn't do that. Your eye doesn't, when you're looking at one thing all of it at once, your eye never focuses on the singular detail of something. Our table in front of us has got glasses and Gatorade bottles and things, your tattoos on your arm. My eye was only able to pick up certain elements at one point. As a painter, though, what you're doing is you're like, if you look at the wasteland and there's all that rubbish, detritus, it's like every single thing I've like labored over, cans and pig's feet.
Down
and
to the
porn,
detail on the porn magazine.
Porn magazine, yeah. Well, again, that was very specific. I wanted very much for that to be the sort of the waste of one certain who shall not be named, the detritus, but that kind of encompassed a wasteland of his disciples as well, the sense that like the things that they are focusing on, the things that they are privy to are all part and parcel of their internal diet as well, fast food, we all do it, food, oil and pornography and,
there's a lot of gluttony involved.
There's a lot of gluttony, yeah. And each piece as well, that was the other thing I wanted to do. I wanted each piece to encompass a circle of hell. That was one of the main things I wanted as well. There were two things going on. It was using T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland as jumping off points through the passages, and then each piece, encompassing the, all of the 9 circles: treason, treachery, heresy, all these different things that like are part and parcel of the circle, but not an absolute encompassed accommodation. Just my interpretation of them.
Well, that's and then the other part of that triangle is then it's all a filter of a reflection of you.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a trichotomy there. For sure.
Yeah. It's been the focus of the 3 series has been, so as I say, Purgatorium was Shakespeare's The Tempest, Paradise's Fall was Milton's Paradise Lost, and Infernal was The Wasteland. And because they've all been 3 books that have meant a lot to me. They've been 3 literary works that I've returned to consistently throughout my life. But they I didn't want to do an absolute reinterpretation. There's others that have done it better. Like if you look at the illustrations Gustave Doré did, I mean, I'm not even going to attempt.
No,
it
you don't want to play in that sandbox.
Right. So yeah.
I also want to touch on the other influences for this series, which they really became obvious once I started digging in and reading, talking to you about the works, which was how the pandemic influenced some of these pieces, how the riots and the Black Lives Matter movement and some of that, like that weird thing is how that correlated to riots back in Liverpool, right?
Right.
Yeah, like I want to get a little bit of the agony in Stony Places detail, because that's got a lot going on in it.
Yeah, it does.
And a lot of really powerful, like current event stuff that was personal.
Absolutely, and it was the sort of evolution of that was such a happenstance, because what I'd done was I'd returned to Dante's Inferno again, and I'd been looking at Gustave Doré's illustrations, and there's a moment in it where there's 2 demons, Calcibrina and I can't remember the name of the other one. They fight and they fall to the blackened pitch. They're both on the same side and they tear each other apart, and they're pulled down and they're swallowed up. And the blackened pitch, of course, it feels like the tarmac of Liverpool, because there's this very kind of like integral mythology in Liverpool as well about the show that Alan Bleasdale created called Boys from the Black Stuff. And it's a 4-part episode. One of the characters in it, Yossa Hughes, goes slowly insane. But one of the jobs that they did was they used to lay the tarmac or the asphalt. And that you know, during sort of the unemployment in Liverpool, they kind of left. So it has this other connotation about, you know, they're boys from the black stuff, they're boys from black matter. And then I'd been looking at alchemy as well, and one of the things I'd been reading about was one of the processes called nigrado, which is, you know, the moment of putrefaction. So the idea to reach entire enlightenment, you go through 4 different stages to get to the stage of the Philosopher's Stone, and the first one is putrefaction. It's called the nigrado. And what happened was the pandemic had happened, and of course, the, you know, George Floyd situation had occurred, and you know, so on and so forth. And I felt like I'm not a didactic artist. I'm somebody who's very impressionistic. I'm not somebody who's able to speak very tangentially about things, social things that are happening. But I felt like it was very important to log this period of time because I feel like I was made for this. I felt like, you know, this is all of the artists, respectively, that I've been fascinated by forever. I've been the Goyas, you know, 100 Years War, Otto Dix, the First World War, you know, Picasso, Guernica. All these extraordinary events have informed the work themselves. And there's writers that have done that. I mean, Eliot himself, T.S. Eliot, while writing The Wasteland, was in convalescence by Lake Geneva, in convalescence from the Spanish flu. So again, that came back to me. I'm like, shit, this is so redolent and so kind of pregnant, but like so fertile for me to dip in there and find different ways to approach it. So while I was looking at the Black Matter thing, the word Black Lives Matter became part and parcel. And I'd been reading about Dante's life and how he'd been exiled many years, you know, after, just whilst he was writing the Inferno, he'd been exiled himself in Italy, and so he'd been fighting as part of with the Guelphs and the Ghibellines, and their crests on one side are black and white. So it became this idea of a light and darkness battle. And then, conversely, I remembered when I was...
Yeah, they definitely have a yin and yang vibe with the demons.
Right, this yin and yang, this Ouroboros that continually kind of eats its own tail. So, when the Black Lives Matter thing and the riots were happening, it really brought back what had happened in my hometown of Liverpool in the 80s. And there'd been my hometown of Toxteth in Liverpool was, again, this very kind of mixed community, very impoverished. And in fact, the street that I lived on, Dove Street, we were the last, all of the houses along that tenement had moved out. So we were the last ones in this middle block, and all the other houses were empty.
And was it a we aren't going, or was it we just hadn't had the opportunity to leave?
Okay. We just didn't have that situation. We were poor, and we were, I think they call it section housing here, but it was council
Section
housing.
8 or low
Section
income,
8, yeah, so it was lower income housing. And so we were the last one on the block to get moved. And what happened over that period was all of those other houses became rat infested, and squatters began to move in. So it was a really bad vibe to it. So then the Toxteth riots thing happened because a black one member of the community had been taken into a police cell and had died in the cell. So of course it was already a heightened tinderbox ready to ignite between the police and the black community, and over I don't want to say like a 3 to 4 day period. It was like the situation that happened with Rodney King in that specific part of Liverpool, and you could hear of a night the sirens and like you'd look through your little net curtains, you could see like the flicker of flames and the shout of voices and people running down the street. And we were really lucky our house wasn't burnt down. But it really left this sense of this impressive almost like a prison riot, like you were like stuck in your cell. So I really wanted to approach that, and I also felt like I wanted to redress the fact that, you know, as an artist, during that time, you know, what had happened with George Floyd, there was a lot of understanding where, you know, there are things that you can do as an artist. You can't ever inhabit what it's like to be a black person, and I know certainly you don't ever want to be somebody that is pontificating, because they don't want to hear from us. They've already.
I never got the
so what I really wanted it to do was place it in this very ambiguous setting. But I made one of the demons. Obviously, you know, he's black.
Right.
Because I wanted to address that idea of like this absurdity of like really the color of skin being, you know, this abstract idea, you know, that people, you know, particularly white supremacists, have made such an issue of. Because I've even got his arm being stripped back.
Yeah, I love the exposed bone.
Exposed bone, this idea that, you know, the two are interchangeable, but neither one of them is one is different from the other. They're, you know, entirely the same beast, if you will, in the sense that from a race point of view, it's separate, but as a human being or a demon.
Yeah.
And it was about the demon. It was about demonized, and who are the demonized and who are the demented. You know.
I mean, and is that a police car that's on fire?
It is.
Yeah,
it is actually a police car, and I got Dante kind of staring into this new Inferno.
Yeah.
You know, I thought that was quite a nice touch, just kind of have him standing there. It's hard because you kind of like, you look at him, and you kind of think, is it like an old gran in a house coat,
Yeah.
You know, kind of staring into the fire, but you kind of get in there, and it's like this nice ambiguity. So
I didn't realize that. I thought it was like a hobo warming his hands over the campfire kind of thing. Like
he could end it. He's there with the marshmallows.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite things when we do shows with you is that we can see the sketches and then the painting. In Agony, the original and the sketch, it was a seascape.
Yeah.
Instead of a police car, it was a sinking ship.
Yeah, and that just shows you the evolution as I'm working, because, you know, I fully intended that to be, like I say, the two demons from Dante's Inferno falling into this blackened pitch. And it was while I was actually painting it, I realized, you know, I want this continuity of setting. I want it to be very land-based. I don't want to have the sense that there is an island and we're all kind of like stuck in the same place. So it became obvious to me that they're being swallowed up by their environment, that the environment itself is, you know, if they just take a moment to realize they're both part of the same oppressive system, that they're, you know, they're baptized by the same world. You know, and there's this theme of baptism throughout the whole series as well. You know, the first piece is a baptism of fire, and then there's the baptism of, you know, tar, and then there's a baptism of blood, and then at the end there's a, you know, baptism of water. But it's the last baptism. I really wanted this sense of like always being kind of like immersed in something that changes you, that anoints you, that you become almost liquefied part of it. So I really wanted that sense with that, but I didn't because it's fire. You know, the moment you put fire and water together, it has an entirely different connotation. Whereas you put fire and tar together, it's a very volcanic sense of eruption. You know.
Yeah.
So that was one of those pieces where it came together as I was working on it. And I generally don't work like that because I'm very, with sketches, it's very specific. I like to be working absolutely from my notes, if you will. I don't like to deviate. All of the kind of thought process, all of the fun work is done in utero, and then when I'm birthing it, it generally just follows suit. It's just the work. It's very workmanlike. You know, I'm following then is color and shade and hue and those and shadow. Those things that I'm looking at that point have very little to do with the conceptual elements of it. So it was quite nice to be at that point during that and realize, like, this is, as I'm painting this and things are happening in the real world, this is evolving. This piece itself is organic. It's happening with the events of the present day. It was very interesting to do that. It was a nice tool. I want to, in fact, my next kind of focus is going to be less. I want to get back to that sense of spontaneity, that not having to imbue every single fucking thing with so much pregnant thought. Right. That you know, even in the process of doing the annotations, it's exhausting, because not only have I already gone through the process of putting that together, but I have to make a decision and a distinction on what is the message entirely that I want to give to the rest of the world. I don't want to overburden them with so much information that any semblance of spontaneity. It's like listening to a record, you know, a Phil Spector record, the wall of sound.
Right.
You're not there in the recording, seeing all of these come together. The beauty is just in the listening of it, closing your eyes and being sort of immersed by this audio extraordinary symphonic sound. So I didn't want to overburden people with too much nuts and bolts of it, and I don't want to do. I think the next series is going to be more in that sphere. It's going to be a lot. It's going to happen in situ. It's going to evolve whilst I'm working. There aren't going to be like a multitude of sketches that happen before it, and it's fun. That there's a sense of play. You know, that's spontaneity. It doesn't. There's no burden on me anymore to kind of like think, well, you know, I like the idea of not knowing what it is I'm saying as I'm doing it. That it reveals itself.
Yeah.
That it reveals itself.
Do you feel like, with all the work that you put into it, the research, do you feel like in any way that makes certain expressions a little more rigid than you would want them to be? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that rigidity, you know, having done it 3 times now, having done it 3 times now, that rigidity, as you know, kind of made me a little weary from the entire process of creating. Like I say, I missed that experimental spontaneity. I certainly wanted a sense of experiment and play with the first half of the series. I was using textures. I was scratching with the end of my brush. You know, if you look at Fear in a Handful of Dust, the Christ crown of thorns is a crown of barbed wire, but I've scratched it in with the end of a sharpened end of a brush.
Nice.
You know, there's a scrap. You thought somebody'd kind of been a little naughty during the show. And
totally thought somebody
damaged it. Yes. I was like, no, it's meant to have that in the wasteland, you know. Because I like that idea that when you look at something, it isn't fully formed. That you can. When you're looking at it, it means one thing, but once you get closer up to it, it means something entirely different. I like that kind of sense of play in the first half of the series. Plus, it was really difficult during the beginning of the pandemic to get any materials because all of the art stores were closed or only allowing drive-by pickup. And because I live out of the city, it's an hour or an hour 30 to any decent art store. So that was really hard for me to get any material. I know, you know, I didn't want to leave at that stage anyway because no one knew how bad it really was. So I like, particularly with the Elephant Man piece, what I was using was like plastic bags to make the textures in the floor, and sponges and you know, that dripping effect in the sky. I really wanted that sense of like almost abstraction, that ugliness, that putrefaction, to be writ large on the canvas. I didn't just want it to be the solitary figure that was blemished. I wanted the entire canvas to inhabit that idea as well.
That's really cool to know that.
Yeah.
That's
and there's
super
drips.
neat detail.
There's drips all over them. I mean, there's fear and a handful of dust. It was like I didn't want to overwork that sky. I wanted this sense of a shroud falling down. You have this white locust kind of almost caught in the vacuum of this black tar-like mist, and then beneath it is this little slither of green sky that could be, some kind of toxic waste in,
It doesn't look healthy.
It isn't healthy, yeah. It was this notion of pestilence, this idea that pestilence has a different connotation from, the one that generally it's not just a plague. It can be the way people, a toxic environment. It can be a toxicity of the soul. It can be a toxicity of a disease. It can be so many different interplays with that idea of what a pestilence is. So without even knowing it happened like so bizarrely, like 2 months into the series. It was such an odd transition that, I'd begun this series when I did, that it seemed, like I say, prescient, like as if I'd almost made manifest.
You're saying you caused the pandemic?
I'm saying that it's absolutely
what I'm
all
hearing,
my fault. Yeah.
He wanted his opening to be like, oh yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody's back together. This is great. Sorry, guys.
I'm glad this podcast didn't go out before then.
Yeah.
There'd have been people hitting me.
The wet market is off the hook. It's all David's fault.
People would have been burning these things in a pyre. It's all evil incantations.
Forget Wuhan. Look at Julian.
Yeah.
Right? Fucking ground zero, San Diego.
Yeah.
You talked about the baptism being a running theme, and then the last baptism being the final piece in the whole series.
Uh-huh.
I figured, and I know that there's a lot of very personal elements in that painting in particular, but I wanted to know how that sealed the series for you, how that was the end. What did that piece mean that it allowed you to use it for the last piece in the entire series?
And it, chronologically it was the last. And what had happened was I'd gotten to, whilst I was in the UK, I already kind of knew the three before it, kind of knew what they'd look like. And it had happened, whilst my dad, he was in hospital for a month before he passed. So with each kind of iteration of sketch, it had informed how it was going to look. And then when I was in England, I decided to do this profit and loss. And that was going to be the last piece. This idea that, it's, the Egyptian god Amit is standing at a crossroads. And on one hand...
It's crocodile, lion, and
a hippopotamus.
Right.
Yeah. And it was very and also he's holding the scale of judgment, the balance,
the feather in the heart.
Yeah. And it's not meant to be my father. It's a lot more kind of ambiguous than that. But I wanted very specifically to inform this idea. So I put the cemetery gates on one side, and this kind of road on another. It was like this notion of a spiritual walk, one being, a place of rest, and the other being kind of forever in sort of purgatory, in a sense.
That makes sense as a last piece.
Yeah.
What did you find that you had something else you needed to say, though?
Yeah, I think what it was I realized that there was still something left unsaid. Yeah. And also, what I wanted to do was I wanted the sense that, I was finally, with the third piece in the series, I wanted to close the arc. I like neat endings. I don't like to leave things open. it's almost like that moment of riding off into the sunset. What I wanted to do,
it does have a sunset.
It is a sunset in there, yeah. In a way, it's a little twee. There is an element there where it's kind of like the end of a horror movie, where it's like, he's dead, or is he? Right. You know, there's that kind of moment there, like it kind of leaves you hanging. But what I wanted to look at was, I wanted to redress, I wanted to turn the mirror on myself. I wanted to say something generationally about what it is. You know, it's very easy when somebody's passed to I wouldn't say cast blame, but there are things left unsaid. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I didn't want to leave that question. I wanted to redress this notion that generational trauma needn't be this thing that we continue throughout the entirety. You know, if I'm looking in terms of legacy, and this is legacy work for me.
Absolutely.
My real legacy is actually my children and my grandchildren. So what I decided was, initially it was going to be a kind of perverted twist on Christ being taken down from the cross. You know, with the...
That was what I immediately got from it, was that symbology, yeah.
With the soldier and the Holy Mother and the wise man. Mm-hmm. But I also was thinking about, you know, that notion of death, where usually at that time there are very specifically three people, and it's the policeman, the nurse or the doctor, and the priest, certainly in Catholic faith. So, you know, I was thinking, like, those characters, I could have just painted anyone, but what I wanted to do was give that responsibility, in a sense, to my children, this idea that they can put the demon being the generational trauma to bed. They're the ones that can lower it into the dark depths, right, and be made clean. Because, you know, every parent has a shortcoming. Certainly, you know, it doesn't matter how great a mum or a dad you are, you always become that, dad. Right. You know, yeah. And you always invariably become that. You try not to. You try to improve on the example you were given every time. So I wanted the last baptism, I wanted it to end on a bit of a high note. I didn't want it all to be like dark and dreary. And,
no, once you explained that, and especially when you told me that it was your kids that were lowering, you know, the
demon,
like that's hope. Like, it's a very dark piece.
It is,
but it's full of hope.
It is full of hope. But then, you know, the other thing is, and it was actually my wife Lani who said, it kind of has like this double meaning as well, where you're not really sure if they're actually saving the demon, if he's been drowning, right, and they pulled him out of the water. I said, that's brilliant. Was he wearing the diver's helmet? Because I wanted to see that. Yeah, I mean, that's actually really cool, because the diver's helmet appears in the first series. Right. So that's the whole
ultimate Easter egg.
Yes, it's kind of this idea, like the very first piece in the first series has this misanthropic character, the idea that, like, it's a monocle, this lens that, like, he stares through and you know, has a singular focus. But I kind of wanted to leave it kind of floating in the water away, and this idea that, you know, like I say, it's over, or is it? You know, it's still here, sort of thing. So
dum dum
dum, yeah.
It's. I think it is now. It keeps switching. Like, my favorite piece in this series has now switched 3 or 4 times. Like, before I saw them in person, I had a very definitive favorite, right. And then now I feel like the Last Baptism is my favorite. And maybe it's. And I think it has something to do with talking to you about it, and understanding it from the artist's perspective. And that's one of the things I love. That's what galleries are for. That's what we're here for. Is that right. Interaction? Like, it exists on a computer screen in one form. And like I said, you know, I had my favorite picked out in that format. But it grew and it gained new life in this environment. And that's why I feel like these environments are important.
Yeah, I think what I like about this series more than the others, and I think what I accomplished more so than any of the other series, is that there's a definite story, a tale from beginning to end. It's a circumstantial chronology because it happened, it revealed itself as it went, like any story does. But the pieces all hang together, and although you can take them one out, and it's still kind of like it's still linear.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It isn't something where there's an ambiguity to the point where you don't get to the end and realize what my intent was. That's why The Last Baptism works, because, like I say, all the others are very much urban. They're very much laid to the earth, The last one is like this sense of being released, this new territory that, we're no longer on terra firma, we're no longer on firm ground. We're being delivered into, this new frontier where I don't know where it's going. Whether we've left one of the passengers behind. I liked that idea of it being like the raft of Medusa, where the sort of the ship had smashed and they built like little raft and spent, I think it was 13 days eating each other. I like that idea. So,
how do the kids react to seeing themselves?
Well, I actually thought, I was worried about that because I didn't ask them, first of all. I just went ahead and did it. Yeah. No, I just went ahead and did it.
I can paint you.
I know, right?
If I want.
I know. And it was funny, because in the last series, I'd done a piece called The Death Eaters, and it was The Fly. And I'd used my daughter as one of the sort of the young girl in it, the missionary. And I'd had my daughter like pose and said, pretend you're eating a fly's leg. And so she kind of...
You couldn't have made it chicken, you actually
yeah,
had
I know,
to
and her response to that was like, but Dad, I'm a vegetarian. Which I thought was perfect. So this time around, painting them, I realized that that was another thing I wanted to address, that this series more than any other, the face, the real human characters are inhabit the world. I wanted the sense that it didn't feel so unmired from the reality that we exist in, that it felt tethered to where we are. It's so odd that, because I think about, Purgatorium was very kind of almost, it's very surreal. It doesn't have this sense of being part of our reality. And then Paradise's Fall does have a certain element to that, but in terms of its placeholder, it's not one singular era. It's it's happening at different points in the same place. It jumps about, even though the geography is the same. With this, it's very specific to almost the same day. I like that about it. So, including my kids in it, I originally had thought I'm going to include myself and my sisters, letting the demon go.
Yeah.
But again, it felt too easy. That it felt, I'm advocating my own responsibility. This is a conversation, an internal dialogue that my children are going to inevitably have one day as well. I hope there are things that we've been able to accomplish in terms of our relationship and the way we communicate. But there are always going to be things left unsaid. And there are always going to be things that, as part of my personal history, that make up some kind of dysfunction. So you kind of hope somewhere along the line that those things are allayed and they're able to let it go, evolve, change. And I've no doubt, because they're all smart and brilliant and have none of them I've had no issues with any of them. I was a fuck up for so many years. my children all like knuckled down straight away and got, you know, respectable jobs and homes and have children, and so already they're building a path, a way forward that is contrary to mine entirely. So, you know, I'm proud of that, and I wanted to having them be absent and me be absent as a parent for like, you know, now 16 years. I only see them through like the internet or when I go home to visit. I really felt like that it was necessary for me to include them as part of this process, that they are equally, if not more important than the work that I've done, that at the end of all of this, the legacy truly is them and not the thing that I've said. I'm happy and I'm proud that I've done the work. I feel I don't feel the weight of full accomplishment yet. It hasn't quite hit me, that process, but I'm aware that what I've done as a triumvirate of works, it's strong work. I'm proud of it. I did it in some of the most extraordinary circumstances, and I was able to deliver on time, and they've been successful. You know, they've sold. And people, the thing more so is that they've resonated with our community and other people, which is more than you can ask for.
Are you worried about the void of
always.
this show in your life?
Always.
Of this series being done, being out of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even the week before this one, I felt the sting of that, even just because I'd driven this up here a week today. And so what you're left with is the sort of the mess of discarded pallets, the vacuum of the work no longer inhabiting your studio space.
Your
So
kids
it
left over
feels like
things.
a grief process. It feels like you've birthed something and it's gone out into the world. Because invariably when you let it go, it's not yours anymore anyway. It's going to end up either on someone else's wall or meaning something entirely different than what you meant it to begin with. It now belongs to the rest of the world. So I want, you know, I
know I experienced that when I work on a show for a year or a year and a half. So I'm working on it 10 years. Like, honestly, I'm terrified for you. Is my point. like thinking about like that much effort.
I think I'm saying it more as like,
you probably process it much healthier than I do, so that's great.
No, you know what? I don't think that's the case. I think I'm glad that I was able to run straight into this last series, this new series from the last. I think the void happened after Purgatorium, that 2-year. I felt listless. I felt adrift. I didn't really know. It wasn't my intention to do 3. I kind of knew in the back of my mind, and then it was. Ulrich said, you know, you really need to finish this. And I was like, okay, you know, I should, you know, he's saying it. So I picked up that baton and ran with it. And I knew that the continuity of scale was going to be the same, that 36 by 48 was that happy medium size for me that I could fit in the car.
Sure, yeah.
Which always makes it nice, barely. And also, at the end of this, what I want is like this token, this kind of coffee table book, this idea that what I'm going to do is compile all of these pieces together. Perfect size for a coffee table book.
Absolutely.
The pages will fit lovely on you know.
And you're going to include all of the sketchbook material, or a lot of the sketchbook material in there
annotations,
as well.
Journal entries,
I
anecdotes.
love your sketchbook from this series.
Yeah, I think the sketchbook's very strong. It's been messy at times, but what I like about it is that, again, I'm able to mark my journey. It's been very much kind of that thing where it's become like a travelogue, where I can kind of go back and go, okay, I stayed in that Airbnb and it was terrible. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was roach and rat infested. That other one though, that couple were lovely. You know, it kind of has that kind of nice nostalgic tint to it, where I can like, oh yeah, I remember that. You know. So it's been nice for that reason, but as I say, it's standalone in itself. But I also feel that the work it's anecdotal. It's not, you know, the sketchbook only gives you an underpinning to what's happened. The actual work itself, it isn't fully necessary to be able to pick through those.
Right.
You know, but even so, you know, I think it's been useful for people to come like they did last night and look through the sketchbook. I could tell, you know, it gave it another facet. It gave people another inkling and understanding of what exactly embodies, you know.
Well, when work is as complicated and full of detail and symbols, and I didn't mean that as an insult, complicated in the sense that there's a lot going on in each one. You know, anything to add insight to it is going to be fascinating.
Right.
And like I said earlier, like I love that you offer us that.
Yeah.
At least some of it. You know.
Yeah. I've never been afraid of revealing my. You know, it's like that Penn and Teller thing. You know, I'll show you the magic trick, but I'll show you how it's done. I kind of like that. I've never been scared of like letting people know what it is that I'm listening to, or what is happening in my life at that time. Like on my Patreon, I kind of have this thing called Soup of the Day, and what I'm basically doing is I'm revealing, you know, what I'm listening to at the time, what I'm reading to at the time, what I'm watching, what things that have happened have made like some kind of impact on me that invariably get filtered through the prism of my work. And it may seem very peripheral. It might not have like a huge impact on the eventual work itself. But somewhere along the line, there might be a passage or a descending melody line or one part of a TV series that like makes such a necessary impact on you that it filters through. I don't know how it does it. It finds its way, and you see it reflected back.
Yeah.
Your subconscious is fertile with the things that that are like imbuing you and affecting you on a daily basis. So I like to do that with, you know, I like people to say, you know, what are you reading right now? What
is your Patreon address?
It's just patreon.com, David Van Gough. Yeah. So I like to do that. Yeah, I like that. Like I like other artists who do that too. I've always, you know, you look at it and you think, oh, what's he thinking? Why is he doing that? Like,
right.
What's happening in his life right now? You know.
Well, art is such a mysterious thing anyway. Like it's you know, I know that you reference alchemy quite a bit, but art is the ultimate real alchemy, where you're literally creating something out of nothing. So that mysterious process is inherent in its creation. Yeah. So getting to peek behind the curtain is always gonna.
Oh, absolutely.
Is always gonna be a desire.
Yeah, and that thing you said about Easter eggs as well. You know, there's a reason why that's like some of the best part of, you know, when you buy the special DVD, because it has all these things, the production notes, and you know, the director speaking, and you know, how is the music composed? Those things, you know, it all fills the void that that you're hungry for. You know. So I like to do that. I again, with the next thing that I do, it's not going to be as fully involved in that level, but I still
does that start tomorrow?
Yeah.
No,
are
you going to force a break, or?
I figured we'd just set the date for the show.
Oh shit!
When we're done with this, we'll just pull out the calendar.
2 years from
today.
today.
Yeah, like 2 years from today.
Fuck your life, David.
Yeah,
Get to work.
I might. Well, I mean, they're going to be a lot smaller. They're not going to be the scale anymore, guys. So, although there is one piece that's niggling at me right now, that's a lot bigger than this entire series.
Really?
Yeah.
Are our walls big enough for it?
Yes.
Okay.
But
this is an important thing to remember. Will it fit through a door?
Will it fit in my car? Yeah.
Well, I got a van I can bring down, but I mean, I'm just saying, we've had art that didn't fit through the door before. That was
how have you gotten that? How have you gotten around that?
I mean,
you taking the door out?
I think we had like an inch to spare with one of
Vincent
Consiglia's.
Yeah.
Like we literally, if the door had been an inch smaller, we'd have been fucked.
Right.
He would have hung on the outside of the building.
Right. Yeah. No, I have to store these things.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Because the bigger you go, the harder it is to sell. You know. So
For sure.
you know, my house isn't. is I live in the countryside in a little quaint cabin. You know what I mean? So it's hard to justify storing these huge, monstrous pieces when you're running out of space. But yeah, it'll be interesting because it's going to be a lot more intimate and psychological. But I'm happy.
And you talked about maybe a lot of it taking place now indoors.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
No longer the giant countryside.
Yeah. Yeah. I want that kind of. I want people to be drawn in. I want people to have to lean in.
Yeah.
I like that notion of I like people stepping back and kind of it consuming them, but also like that notion of people like peering into something and seeing tiny little details and trying to, in some way, decipher what's going on. Almost having to hurt your eyes, to get the message. So I'll see. I know vaguely, basically, what it's going to be informed by, but how it's going to look, I have no idea right now.
Well, we know one piece that's coming down the pipeline already.
Right. So it's I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, but I'm doing a collaboration with a very good friend of mine. I've known for as long as I've known Lonnie, 16 years. But we were originally just internet friends, and then, I want to say 5 years ago, I was at CoPro, and she just walked in. Jasmine Beckett Griffith. Just wandered in with her husband, Matty, and it was a phenomenal sort of like, we've known each other all for so long, and now we have like this real, simpatico friendship, and we write like huge messages to each other, like not little voluminous novels about our life and our ideas and stuff. And then I was speaking to her over dinner about 2 years ago, and this was just before she got cancer. And she's fully recovered now, thankfully. But I kind of spitballed over dinner, it would be really cool to see what a collaboration between the two of us would look like, because what she does is very distinctively and definitively different. But I got this sense as well that what she wants to do is sidestep a little bit outside what she generally does. When you're hugely successful, like someone like Jasmine, you're pulled along by the momentum of a train. Your success, in a way, can be as equally restrictive as it can be freeing. And I get the sense, sometimes speaking to her, that she isn't fully able to challenge herself in the way that she would like, or explore the areas of her skill sets in the way that she would like. So
there's definitely expectation on her, I'm
right,
sure.
without a doubt, a tremendous pressure.
Yeah.
And what she does is exquisite. Her work is to look at it in person. The canvas closed. It's illuminated. She's a master. She has her line and her shade and her color. She's an old master.
I don't know if you want to talk about it on the podcast or not, but when you told me the concept of the collaboration, I nutted.
So what had happened? Was we'd played with this idea of Death and the Maiden, that old European tradition, because I've always loved that art, and she loved that idea too. And I said, well, let's do it this way. You do Death, and I'll do the Maiden. So I did a little sketch, and it was like a crone, and it was our first kind of like inception idea, and it was a crone standing over somebody who looks very much like Jasmine, with her hair flowing over her, like almost like Gwyn. Who's the woman that rode the horse with the nude woman?
Godiva.
Lady Godiva. Thank you, Lonnie. Lady Godiva. And the crone looks like she's sucking the essence away. And it was this idea, this interplay that we talked about aging, and about potency. And then what happened was she got sick, and I discovered, she discovered she had cancer. And I felt, I said, did I somehow, like, again, manifest this? So I said to her, you know what, you should.
You gotta stop painting.
I know, right? So I said, I'm not responsible. You're going to run with it this time. I'm going to let you be the arbiter of how this piece looks. So it's for a show in November that we're going to do here at the Dark Art Emporium. We're going to do a piece together. We haven't sat down yet and kind of sketched out. I have a few ideas and she has ideas. Yeah. So somewhere we'll, what usually invariably happens with Jasmine is she's just moved to Long Beach, which is great.
So stoked to have her.
I know, it's awesome. So it
Welcome to the hood.
It makes it easier because she was flying from Florida. She has a place out there, and so she would just come for dinner and then fly back. So now she's actually got a spot. She's going to spend most of the time at this year because she's got a show at Corey Holford Gallery coming up on January the 10th, I believe, or January the 8th, and so we'll go over for dinner. And we'll probably end up opening a couple of bottles of wine and then, something exceptional will come out of that little jam session. So I'm very excited about that collaboration. That's very different for me. Yeah. And I like I say, I'm really going to be interested on what it looks like, how we make that OX simpatico. And I've talked about the possibility of even painting over each other's work. Or seeing like you concentrate on this element and I'll concentrate on that element of the same figure, of the same character. So yeah, it's a nice idea, and
your styles are so different. I can't wait to see the interplay.
Yeah,
the interplay.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I no doubt that it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, and what I want as well, I want that kind of like sense that no one can tell who did what. I think you might.
I'm really curious to
stylistically if we can do
Yeah.
that, and it's going to be so. Jasmine works in acrylic, and I said I'll work in acrylic for this.
Okay. Do you do that? You don't do that often, yeah?
I haven't done it for since I moved to the US, because I with the heat, the climate, I take a fucking long time over painting, so there's an immediacy to acrylic. Yeah. And she's so quick and so fast at what she does. So I'm like challenging myself again, but I'm hoping that somewhere within that the alchemy of that, the styles mesh. But my fans and her fans are left scratching their head to kind of see whose voice is there. So it's cool. It's a nice little sense of play that we've got going to have going on. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, it's first exclusive right here. Yeah, I'm telling everybody.
That's going to be a really cool show.
Yeah.
I got some really good artists.
Aestheta.
And I can't wait to see.
Yeah, I know. It's a great title. I know. I should have thought of it.
Aestheta. Yeah, it's one of those, it's a made-up word that means nothing and everything.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, this again, there's another nice ambiguity there that when people, because shows are so hard, group shows are so hard, because you've got the mantle of trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It's always like this. The thematically might not be something that you generally do.
And that's one of the reasons why when I approach proposing a group show, I really try hard not to create a pigeonhole concept.
Right.
I really like it to be very ambiguous. For Aestheta, it's simply what I put in the description. Show me your version of beautiful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get much more fucking ambiguous than that.
Yeah.
But I feel like that it's just enough to maybe create some weird synergy across the board, but not something that's obvious.
Yeah, it has that again. It has that lovely ambiguity to it. Yeah. That word that you're not able to pinpoint entirely. There are a whole manner of sins that could accommodate that word alone. So it's going to be an exciting show. I don't know if you've seen any of the pieces.
Just a couple.
Just a couple, yeah.
Not much.
Not much.
Yeah, we used Ash Darks for the promo.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, Ash.
It's a great piece.
Amazing artist. Yeah. Out there in the Antipodes.
On the flip side.
Yeah. on the Upside Down, yeah. Yeah, that's just exciting. The lineup is really exciting for that one, yeah.
Yeah.
That'll be my first kind of like dip of my toe back into the group show thing.
Yeah.
Since the last time I did one with you, which was like 3 years ago, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was an anniversary. I think it was. Like
It was
a 2-year anniversary.
Yeah, and in fact, it wasn't this weekend your 4th year anniversary.
No, it's October.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think we just did the show early.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We couldn't time it to the actual anniversary.
okay. All
So but technically our anniversary is October.
Okay.
Yeah, this is our 5th year.
Yep. It's crazy.
It's wild.
Yeah, the witching month.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Why wouldn't we be obvious?
I know, right?
Freaking
Yeah.
little on the nose
yeah.
there, right?
What does it say? What does it say on the tin? Right? Yeah. Yeah.
So what else, man? What else do we got to talk about? What else do we got to promote? Do you got anything else coming up?
What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
Pistachio.
That's fucking weird too.
With mint choc chip.
Oh God.
That's
Yeah.
Leslie likes that one.
I have an old man's palate, so I like butter pecan.
Oh yeah, that's a nice one. That that is
That's
a good
such
one.
an
Yeah.
old man ice cream.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm hardcore cookies and cream.
Yeah.
You're hardcore for what?
Cookies and cream.
Oh yeah, Lonnie's the cookies and cream one
Yeah.
as well. Yeah. Yeah, I don't like ice cream that has like too much matter in it. You know.
We're going over our favorite ice creams now. If you'd like to chime in.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
What's your favorite ice cream, Lauren?
Probably green tea ice cream.
What with green tea?
Yeah.
Like matcha?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I liked that even when I was like a toddler. I liked
Okay.
green tea ice cream. I don't know.
I'll
I've
have to
had
give
to
that.
find.
I've had that at a like a hibachi restaurant before. Green
It's
tea
pretty
ice
good.
cream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to give that a try.
It's light.
See, I have this thing as well about tea that it has to be hot because I'm British.
Yeah.
So the whole iced tea thing like sent me for a loop. The first time I ever came over, I was like horribly jet lagged, and I was staying in a Motel 6, and I went to Caro's, which was like this little breakfast place next door.
Yeah, I remember Carol's.
And I went and ordered tea, and you know she brings out a glass with like this, looks like basically, as Lonnie describes it, dirt in water.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what is that? And then I touched it. I'm like, it's cold. And she goes, you ordered tea. And I said, oh no, I want it hot. So she brings out the tea in, you know, a little teapot,
Yeah.
stainless steel teapot. And I'm like, great. Can I have some milk, please? She brings back a glass of milk. I'm like, oh, I'm getting back on the plane. But no, even then it was like, can I have some toast? And in England you just get, you know, white bread. That's all you get.
Right.
It's toast. Here it's sourdough, grain. Do you want, you know, all of these different options. So you're spoiled, you're ruined in this country. But I love it.
Yeah, except we can't do tea apparently.
But you
so.
can't have tea. You
Yeah.
can't do tea properly. Yeah. Yeah. But you have all manner of teas here. Green tea, like you're saying. Yeah. I'm a breakfast tea. I'm a black tea kind of guy.
This is the most
Scintillating conversation.
Oh my God.
Well, this is the result of like, because we partied till dawn. We literally did party till
Literally,
dawn.
yes.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like the old man in need of his Horlicks
Dude,
and
I
his
don't even know
pipe
what
and
that
his
is, but I want it.
slippers. You know, before he goes to bed. It's definitely getting down to the nail now. Where you know.
Well, I mean, I think we've said enough.
Yeah, we've definitely hit our time mark.
I was gonna say.
But I want to make sure there's nothing else that we
yeah.
need to cover, and we can always edit the
Yeah,
meeting
yeah,
conversation out.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, next month we'll announce next month's show. We've got Ego
Yep.
and Carolina Seth on September 11th.
yes,
So, in the meantime, come on over here and see Infernal in
yeah, the gallery's
person.
open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday now,
Yes.
so you can just show up. You don't even have to make an appointment.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome back. It's nice to be back, and I'm kind of proud to be the first kind of fully fledged openings again. you
No,
know?
when we were hanging the show, like I told Cross, I was like, David is like the artist for this gallery. Like,
100%.
I feel the same way.
Like when I think about like,
Yeah.
you know, when I first came up with it and we were thinking about like, I was like David Van Gough, like that type of art, like it's just perfect for us.
Yeah, and your gallery, conversely, is the perfect gallery for me.
Yeah.
It's just the shame about the people who run it. Really.
We're like
Yeah.
two spoons.
Yeah. We really are. Which one are you though?
Either one, I'll take whatever I can get.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for showing with us, David.
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
Very
on
honored.
The culmination
Very honored.
of 10 years work.
Thank you.
Super powerful, really impressive, amazing pieces.
Thank you.
I can't wait for the book.
Yes, I'm excited.
You'll have to keep us informed so that we can help promote and sell the fuck out of that thing.
Yeah.
Because it will be needed.
Yeah, I think what we talked about was doing a kind of pop-up opening where any remaining pieces from the free series we'd hang, and then I'd sell the book.
Yes.
We'd do like a signing day
all
for the
for
gallery.
that.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
It sounds like a great idea.
We
So-
might need some more walls, but
I don't know. You guys are going to sell the shit out of this one, right?
I mean, yeah,
Well, we'll salon style
We'll only have,
3x4
one left.
painting. Painting. Just salon style the shit out of the.
Or you should build some more walls.
Yeah.
we can always do that. Fuck it.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We
Appreciate it.
We love you,
Yes.
and we'll have you back in here soon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening, everybody. This has been the Art Pit.